And here we are. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gilbert Martinez. I am from Vroman's Bookstore, and I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us tonight for virtual event with Eric Nusbaum in conversation with Janice Llamoca, presenting his book, Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between. We are very excited and grateful that our bookstore can continue to bring authors and their works to our community during this uncertain time. Now, Vroman's Live will be hosting more virtual events in the future, and you can learn about them on our website as well as our social media. Our next event is this coming Tuesday, April 28th at 5 p.m. with Leanne Dolan in conversation with Susan Wiggs, who will be presenting her book, The Sweeney Sisters. For regular updates on upcoming events, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that by going to vromansbookstore.com. This evening's virtual event will end with a Q&A. So if you'd like to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen right over there. If you see a question on the list that you'd like our interviewer to ask and our author to answer, you can click the like button on that question, and we'll try to answer as many questions as time will allow. Now, also, if you're interested in supporting our bookstore by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, you can click on the purchase button. It says Purchase Stealing Home directly below the viewer screen. The link will redirect you to our website where you can continue your checkout process. We are selling digital audiobooks and ebooks through Libro FM and Kobo for those interested. With that, let me introduce you to our interviewer and author. Janice Llamoca is an award-winning journalist and producer at NPR's Latino USA. She began her career as an entertainment digital journalist, and over the past 5 years, Janice has shifted her focus to audio sharing narratives about communities of color. During her time as radio producer, she has done stories about history, language access, and culture, and humanizes her stories with compelling voices. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, NPR's Code Switch, LA Weekly, Remezcla, and more. Our author tonight is Eric Nusbaum. He is a former sports editor at Vice. In addition to Vice, his work on sports, history, and culture has appeared in ESPN Magazine, Sports Illustrated, Outside, The Daily Beast, Deadspin, and the Best American Sports Writing Anthology. Eric was born and raised in LA. He has spent many hours both attending games at Dodger Stadium and sitting in traffic to reach those games, as many of us have. They are here tonight to present Eric's book, Stealing Home. So I'd like to now turn it over to them. And before we get to the Q&A section later, they'll let you know. And please enjoy this. Janice, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the intros. Well, hey, Eric.
Hey, Janice. How's it going? You're muted. Hold on.
Am I not muted anymore?
Now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just talked about the technical difficulties. That was my bad. But I just wanted to say congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Can't even imagine how you feel like being able to hold your book. How does that feel like for you?
It's a really good feeling. I remember when the first box came to the door and just opening it up and seeing like the actual book in hardcover. It was surreal. It's still kind of.
And I know. Oh, I can imagine. It's placed lovely behind you. If you guys can see it.
There it is.
Strategized very strategically. So I know Gilbert gave quick intros about you, but a quick intro about you. But I really want to hear a little bit more about your career and life and how it all came together for you to write this book.
Sure. So I feel like this book was in my head before I even had a career. I was a high school student, and a man named Frank Wilkinson, who is one of the central figures in the book, spoke to my U.S. history class at Culver High, and he told the story of his life. And he was a housing official with the city of Los Angeles who was kind of dramatically blacklisted in 1952 for his secret membership in the Communist Party. And the reason that he was outed as a communist is because he was trying to develop a public housing project in the land where Dodger Stadium now sits. And his story kind of began with this phrase, Dodger Stadium should not exist. And I was a kid who loved baseball, and that was shocking to me. And it always stuck with me, the kind of power of that story. And as I grew up and became a journalist and a writer, I never really let it go. And I think on some level, I've wanted to kind of add my contribution to the story of Dodger Stadium and the communities that preceded it that whole time.
When you heard that phrase, Dodger Stadium should not exist, did you, like, I mean, that's one thing to know, but when did you actually realize the history behind, like, the communities out there? Did he talk about that?
He gave us like a very brief rundown. And if you read the book, I wasn't trying to plug it, but if you read the book, you'll see that he was a very true believer in public housing. And his belief was that Dodger Stadium should not exist because Dodger Stadium should be the site of something called Elysian Park Heights, which would have been this very grand public housing project. He didn't get into the communities too much. And as I learned more about them, Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop, I came to have a much deeper understanding of kind of the real tragedy in the story, which is that, families lost their homes and ultimately saw their land sold by the government to a private businessman. And that, there's a lot of drama and ins and outs and how that happened, but kind of that's what happened.
And we had a conversation earlier, and we talked about how this is your first book and how this is actually your first time really diving into this topic. And it seems like you saved it for something where you can actually really give it, bring it justice. I guess the decision for you to not just make it into an article, but to make it into a book, what was the decision for that for you?
Part of it was that I don't think that I could have fit everything into an article. I really wanted to tell the story as completely as I could, within reason and within, a single volume. I wanted to kind of unspool the threads as long as they would be. And, when you're writing a magazine article, even a long magazine article, a feature kind of, cover story type article, they really have a certain length and a certain kind of focus. Usually it's like one or two subjects. And if you get beyond that, then it starts to get confusing and it doesn't really do the subjects justice. And I knew that the subjects of this book really needed kind of a longer telling on the page, but they also needed more time and more research to be told right. And as a journalist, you only have so much time to get to your next story and hit your deadline. And I couldn't have done enough work as a reporter and researcher to turn this into a magazine story.
And kind of just going from there and hearing how, you needed the space to kind of bring these characters to life or do them justice. In the book, there's a lot of history, whether it's history about baseball in Los Angeles, Mexico, the US in general, and also you talk a lot about the historical tension between Mexico and the US in a very narrative way. But you also write about people and you give them chapters, a lot of different people that were involved in this bigger story. But you specifically kind of focus in on two characters, Abraham Arechiga and Frank Wilkinson. How did that decision come about for you to kind of focus in on their stories?
When I first started, I didn't quite have that specific, of a focus. I had a broader kind of idea and vision for the book, probably. But, on one level, as a storyteller, you have, the best way to tell a story is through people's lives, is through individuals. And something about those two lives in particular really stuck out to me. With Abrana, she was just a really remarkable person who lived a life that, in many ways was pretty normal. She was a mother and a grandmother. She worked hard and she took care of her family. She was an immigrant. But she also ends up kind of rubbing up against these big historical forces that kind of fling her life around. And there's something about her, this kind of resoluteness that caused her to resist those forces in a way that other people didn't, and not, because they couldn't or didn't want to or whatever it was. There was something different about her personality that drew me in. And when you hear about the story of Dodger Stadium, you often see the images of the family, the Arechiga family, getting evicted from their house. And I was curious, what was it about this family and their journey that led them to be violently evicted by sheriff's deputies, where that didn't happen to most of their neighbors. And with Frank, yes. So, Frank was really the inspiration for this book in many ways. He was the person who put the story in my head. He was also just a fascinating character. He lived a life that felt like something out of a movie. He was bit by a coyote as a child. He traveled Europe in the 30s. He went from being a conservative Methodist from Beverly Hills to being a radical communist. He had multiple kind of second acts in his career. He ended up kind of, after most of the action of the book is over, he goes to jail, to federal prison to protest the House Un-American Activities Committee. I mean, Frank he was a handful. And also, he was somebody whose kind of ambition and career were similar to Abrana, thrown into kind of chaos by forces beyond his control. And I was curious about that.
When did, and just in reading the book, just kind of going through it and devouring it, I can see the threads, like they almost lived parallel lives in a way. Not exactly, but they like even their like movement from Arizona to California, but still apart, right? They're still apart. But also just the different, the way you paint in the book, the way you paint their lives is, 1 year and then where the other person is another year, and then kind of until their lives actually clash, until that moment where they're kind of the intersection does happen. When did you see those threads, I think, come together during your research?
I mean, I knew early on that, the book was going to kind of center on this sort of inflection point where their lives meet. And that was going to be, in 1949-50, when the Housing Authority is evicting people from Palo Verde, which is where Abrana lived, to build Elysian Park Heights. I knew that was going to be the place where they met. And then I knew that, their lives were going to kind of go in different directions after that. So a lot of the work of the book was, first of all, kind of getting their timelines down, seeing where they were and what they were doing and what to focus on, and then seeing, kind of balancing how to tell the stories in a way that, you cared enough to stick with both of them, with the understanding that they would eventually have this sort of tragic meeting, I guess.
And I think it's, kind of just knowing about this history and having seen a lot of the research, like the material that's written about Abrana is usually what we see in the LA Times. Sometimes it's a chapter in a professor's book. But I haven't seen her story really, I guess, brought to life the way you do. So it's a lot of additional research. I'm sure you've reached out to a lot of family members to kind of build that portrait of Abrana. Was that something that you found difficulty finding the people and reaching out to them? And
I mean, it was not so difficult in that it was impossible. Some members of her family wanted to speak about her, and some people who lived in the community wanted to speak about her, who I reached out to, and some didn't. I don't think I reached out to every single person. I know I didn't, because there's too many, and it's a testament to her that she was a memorable person who kind of left an impression on those who knew her, including her grandchildren, some of whom were gracious enough to speak with me. My background is more as a reporter than it is as a historian. So doing that stuff is actually probably more natural than going to an archive for me. But it's still, I'm an outsider. And Abrana and her family were really mistreated by reporters in the 50s when this was all happening. So I think if there was distrust, I think it was pretty justified.
And when you were speaking to the family members and even the community members of Palo Verde and the other communities, did you sense that pain kind of just came back as they were retelling their stories, or even if they didn't live specifically in that era, kind of that legacy of pain that has traveled throughout their generations.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think even for people who, have a more forgive and forget attitude, there's still pain. I think if you lose your home and your family loses its home, that's painful. For some people, it's really, really visceral, and decades later, they're still really hurt over it. There was not a lot of amends made by anybody for what happened to these communities, and the experience of being sort of mistreated by government and by business, and then sort of having to get on with your life, without the community that you built and that you loved, it's a heavy experience. And I've never experienced it myself. So, I mean, I can't speak to the specificity of their pain, but to people, when you go through something like that, it doesn't just go away.
But I know also, you've spoken to grandchildren, also great-grandchildren, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for that story to be told generation to generation, I can assume how impactful it was in their lives.
Yeah, there's great-grandchildren of Abrana and Manuel who are out doing, activism over it. There's a group called Buried Under the Blue that does, kind of renter and displacement activism, and they feel it. The inherited trauma, I think, is the phrase that I heard. It's not, these kinds of events, whether it's Dodger Stadium or a public housing project or anything else, they have lingering effects on communities.
Is there something that, while doing the research for this book, that you thought you knew, but then you were like, no, I had no idea, something that was a complete revelation to you?
I was struck repeatedly by how, I feel like this is going to be bad because I feel like I kind of criticized the media earlier, and I'm a member of the media, but I was struck by how sort of transparently one-sided and kind of propagandist the LA Times was in the 50s, and a lot of the newspapers. The Chandler family is sort of notorious, or was notorious for, using the paper as a kind of political cudgel. But like reading the actual articles and seeing how sensationalist and like blatantly untrue a lot of the stuff that they published was, really just to advance the political agenda of the paper's owners, was something that like left an impression for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Especially being a member of the media, I can assume, right? It's just
and I grew up reading the LA Times, and I love the paper. I think the LA Times right now, especially, is amazing. But reading about the LA Times of the 50s and reading those articles was mind blowing.
Yeah. Is there an interesting experience you had while in the making of this book, in the research phase of this book, the writing of this book?
An interesting experience. One thing about this book that I really loved was getting the chance to just speak with people about their lives and like getting the trust of somebody to tell their story. I think that's a really sacred thing, and it's really hard to overstate. I don't know, the responsibility that I feel when somebody sits down with me. So my favorite memories from writing the book are probably, sitting in somebody's dining room or kitchen with them and just hearing them tell their stories. A few of the people I've interviewed have passed away since I started writing the book, and that's heavy as well. A guy named Camilo Arevalo is in the book, a guy named Beto Elias is in the book, and it's sad to me they didn't get to see the finished product, but I'm also grateful that I got their time and I got the chance to tell a little bit of their story.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed that throughout the pages of the book, because it is a historical book, usually there are images, right, that are kind of like historical images that are placed within the book. And I realized that you have illustrations. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the illustrations are by a guy named Adam Villasin. He's a friend of mine, and they're incredible. I feel like I should take the book down, but I'm going to knock something over to show you.
I can bring up an illustration.
So I thought about doing photos in the book, but one thing about getting photos in a book is that you have to get the rights to put them. And so some of the photos were trickier than others. You also have to pay for those as an author out of pocket. And I thought, if I'm going to be paying for, photos to use in the book, I really wanted something that was going to be special and different, and sort of give an impression and maybe kind of create more emotional resonance for the reader. So there's one at Echiga. So I asked Adam if he would kind of, draw the book for me a little bit, and he did, and it came out great. I'm really excited about that. I think seeing the pictures in it, also my kids like the pictures in the book, and it makes it feel accessible to them.
And I think, like, for me, just reading a preface, it kind of let me know, and we talked about this in the beginning, kind of just like how everything came together for you to actually write this book. There's one line that stuck out to me a lot. I'm just going to read it really quick. You wrote, "I struggle to reconcile that Dodger Stadium, a place that I love so much, was also the source of pain to so many people. As a Dodgers fan, native Angelino, how has that experience, how has their experience from beginning to end of the making of this book, has it helped with that struggle? Has it changed anything for you?"
Yeah, I think it's helped. I mean, I think it's become, that struggle is sort of like the question of the book, right? And I kind of came to believe that it's good to struggle with that kind of question, that, I love the Dodgers, and as it, like, not as much as like I care so much about like what trades they make, although I do, but like as an institution and a part of my life, and I love the city of LA, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. And I think that if you love something, it's okay to be critical of it, and it's okay, and it's not even okay, it's good to do that. It's good to say, like, you know what, I love this, but it's not right. You can do that with, your religion, or with your family, or with the city you live in. I love LA too, but LA has a lot of problems, and I don't think anybody who lives there would tell you otherwise. So if you're a fan of a team or an institution like the Dodgers, it's okay to say this is wrong and this wasn't right. And, with this book, it's really much more about the city of LA and the county and kind of the region and the U.S. history than it is about a baseball team. But I think that question of whether you can love a place and have problems with it at the same time kind of expanded from just being Dodger Stadium to being, I guess, Los Angeles.
Yeah, holding your loved ones accountable is something we have to do, right? And I feel like you write about Los Angeles in a very beautiful way, but also you really bring to light everything that happened within, from like city government to the communities that were affected by this.
Thank you.
And kind of just bringing everything to the present, what could the Dodgers do, as in your opinion, as a journalist? What could they do to kind of reconcile what has happened?
All right. So what I would say is that this, like, the Dodgers are not like the guilty party in this book. This is not a book like criticizing the Dodgers. Like, it's critical of the Dodgers a bit, but really it's about kind of a failure of government more than anything else. And I think the Dodgers and the city of LA and the county government, state government, federal government, I think there should be an acknowledgement of what happened and that it was wrong. That would be a very basic first step. But I'm not a member of those communities. I'm not somebody who was evicted with eminent domain to build a public housing project only to see my house become a baseball stadium. So it's not for me to say what they should do. But I think just saying something would be a really good start.
And I think that, like, I know that there, I guess, have maybe been a small attempt at this, but it hasn't really been anything official.
I think like 20 years ago, in the year 2000, when the Dodgers were owned by Fox, they had a very small kind of ceremony at a church in Solano Canyon, and they extended a literal olive branch to some community members. But it was very much like a one-time deal, and now the Dodgers don't really talk about this. It's not really on the agenda for the team, for whatever reason.
And in the making of this book, I assume that you had been to the hills. Were you able to go to places that you wrote about that are no longer there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you go up to, Legion Park, or you go up to the hills around Dodger Stadium, and some of the, roads are still there, and the little kind of streets are still there, but they're not really the same. the construction of Dodger Stadium really changed the landscape geographically of what that area was going to look like. So I went to, a few times. There's something called the Desterados Picnic, where people who live in the communities will go every July and they'll have a picnic at Elysian Park. And you talk to some of the elders there, and you say, where was so and so? And the truth is that like they can give you a kind of generally where things were, but the hills are not the same. The Dodgers moved like hundreds and thousands of tons of dirt to rebuild the stadium. There's new access roads and freeway entrances, and it's just it's a different looking place and a different feeling place than it was then.
And the residents who were displaced and family members of the residents who were displaced, as you were interviewing them, did you notice that they stayed around the area in Los Angeles, or had they completely been?
I mean, most people moved, stayed in LA, right? A lot of people moved to Lincoln Heights or Boyle Heights or, just kind of nearby areas. I think some people even Solano Canyon, just really other parts of LA, Long Beach, it wasn't like they were like banished from the country, but they kind of got absorbed back into the city where everybody else was. And it wasn't the same, I think everybody would say that, oh yeah, we went back to, whatever neighborhood it was, and we didn't know our neighbors, and we didn't have the same sense of community that we had before. And I think losing that sense of community and that sense of pride was one of the big losses, in addition to just the, physical loss of the homes.
Yeah, the loss of community, just like a starting over for the children, starting over for the parents, starting over for the elders is just something that was completely lost in their history, and their kind of being able to go back home was not available to them anymore, no longer, when their house.
Yeah, I mean, the houses, the community was mostly evicted, right? And like kind of by 52. And then in 53, the housing project was scratched. So it was almost empty. And then it sat empty for a long time, except for a few families like the Arechigas who had stayed. So people like kids, high schoolers would come back on Friday nights to like hang out in their empty old neighborhood. Could you imagine doing that? Like, it's such a strange feeling, but that's what it was like.
And to kind of wrap this up, I want to know what you want your readers to take from reading this book. Like, what do you want them to understand?
I hope that they, are entertained and enjoy the book, first of all, and that they, come away with some slightly maybe deeper understanding of, this story in LA's history, and sort of like a sense of how people and the institutions around us interact, and how kind of power works in cities. And that was sort of a revelation for me when I was writing it, for sure, to see kind of how things that seem distant from us can really become deeply intimate very quickly.
And I know we've talked about this before, how this story specifically, even though it took place more than 50 years ago, is still very present. It's still happening in different communities all over the country. It's always something that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going on in LA right now. It's different, but if you look at Inglewood, for example, there's still communities being affected by the construction of sports stadiums. There's still displacement. There's still gentrification. It's not a totally old story.
Yeah. Hey, Gilbert.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. I was here the whole time. Don't worry. So we're going to transition into our Q&A section, which I'll ask some of the questions, and then Janice, feel free to ask any follow-ups that you see that might be interesting. Brina, as you were just talking about the continued effects of things like this with Inglewood and areas that are affected by these kind of construction things. Actually, one of the top voted questions that we have here is, do you see similarities? This is from Rolando Cruz. And he's asked, do you see similarities with gentrification in Los Angeles now and the displacement of folks in Chavez Ravine then?
Yeah, I don't think it's the same, right? That was a very specific set of circumstances that led to that particular displacement. But I think if you look at the underlying dynamics, where you have powerful people deciding what should happen to the land of less powerful people, and wealthy people deciding what should happen to the land of poor people. That's very much happening. It's exactly what's happening in Inglewood right now. It just depends how you look at it, but my answer is yes.
Right. And Patrick Geeney commented on that particular question. Do you know if Frank Wilkinson ever, quote unquote, did anything about his FBI file?
So he actually sued to get his FBI. So Frank Wilkinson, and I didn't say this, he was tailed by the FBI for decades. And his FBI, I mean, it's not 100%, I can't prove it. My understanding is that his FBI tail is what kind of leaked his Communist Party membership to the LA real estate interests who wanted his career to get ruined. And he found this out much later. He sued the FBI in the 80s for his file. And that's when he found out that he had been tailed for decades. He actually didn't know until he was already an older man that he had an FBI agent on him for his entire life.
Yikes. Something to find out. This is pretty tough. The next highest vote question is from Cheryl Franco. She asked, since the book has been released, have you heard anything from the Dodger organization about it?
No. Nothing at all. It's also, I mean, there's no baseball right now too, so who knows? The Dodgers might be too distracted to comment on the book. But no, I mean, I haven't heard anything from the Dodgers.
Okay.
Should we add them in this Twitter?
Yeah, can we get like one of the owners just to pop on?
So there's definitely a couple here that I think you have answered during the course of it, talking about the emotions of the people that you interviewed. You talked about that, and definitely still feeling the echoes of what has happened to their families over the generations. But Andrew A. asked, when the Dodgers came to Los Angeles, almost immediately Jaime Jarrín became the Spanish voice of the Dodgers. Was this seen as a representation for the Hispanic community during the early years, or did the Battle of Chavez Ravine overshadow Jarrín's presence? And were there Valenzuela joined the team?
So that cut off after Jarrín's presence for me and picked up again with join the team.
Oh, it was just did the Battle of Chavez Ravine overshadow Jarrín's presence, and were there Hispanic fans before Fernando Valenzuela joined the team?
I mean, so one thing about the Dodgers is that I don't think that they came to town with the intention of just pissing off every Mexican American and Mexican person in LA at the time. That was not their goal. Their goal was to be actually an inclusive franchise, and one of the ideals that OMalley talked about when he built the stadium was he wanted it to be a stadium for everybody. He wanted it to be affordable, which it was. He wanted it to be a place that women felt comfortable coming to games, because that was not always the case at Ebbets Field and in other major league parks. And he wanted to reach diverse audiences. So he brought in, it was Rene Cardenas, and then it was starting in '59, Jarrín, to broadcast games in Spanish. And I mean, I think that, people listened. I don't know how many, I don't have the ratings, but I mean, Jarrín has been employed since by the Dodgers. He's still calling games. And to the Fernando question, I think that there's always this theory that everybody, in East LA hated the Dodgers until Fernando Valenzuela came. But I'm not sure if that's totally true. I can't imagine that there were no Hispanic Dodger fans before 1981. I think that Fernando increased the Dodgers' visibility in Latin America a lot, and in those communities in LA, and also amongst white fans, amongst black fans, amongst everybody. Fernando Valenzuela was a phenomenon that truly was universal, and his appeal went beyond any one group.
Awesome.
And you also write in your book about the kind of just, and I didn't know much about the history of baseball or how it was kind of growing in Mexico. And I mean, it had its high point and then its low point. But that was interesting. And that is an attestament to kind of just how someone who was living in Mexico and then maybe moves to Los Angeles can still be a baseball fan and kind of maybe find their team now that they're living in Los Angeles, and how that can carry.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, especially in like northern Mexico. I mean, baseball remains extremely popular, and it was popular all throughout this time in Mexico too. It's not like baseball, even though we say it's the American sport, the national pastime, but baseball has a long history, obviously, in other countries, right? In Cuba and Japan and Mexico and Dominican Republic, right? Baseball is the only professional baseball being played right now is in Taiwan and Korea, you know?
Covering some other things that you had already talked about, but did you, Thea Ward asked, did you interview anyone from the OMalley family for comments or information on this book?
I actually was really, really fortunate that the OMalley family allowed me access to some of Walter O'Malley's papers and his files from when he was moving to LA and kind of planning the stadium. Peter O'Malley kind of granted me that, and it was such a huge help in writing the book. I'm really thankful to them for that, because I wasn't really aware of what a kind of visionary Walter O'Malley was in terms of how he conceived of baseball as a spectator sport. You know, we think now about like baseball stadiums that have like all these different entertainment things in them, and Dodger Stadium might seem kind of old even in that context. But he was the first person to really like see baseball as like this family-friendly kind of experience. He like consulted with Walt Disney about how to build an ideal fan experience at Dodger Stadium. That's the kind of level he was thinking on when it came to constructing this place. And getting to dive into his like little notes and index cards where he wrote down ideas was great. It was really helpful in assembling the last part of the book. And it was also, as a baseball fan and a person who loves Dodger Stadium, kind of a thrill to see where it came from.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Now, we only have time for a few more questions. I guess this one, do you see any, this is from Mike Sean, do you see any linkages between the destruction of Chavez Ravine and Bunker Hill?
Sure. I mean, there's historical ones, right? Like, sorry, I'm going to get kind of nerdy. Like, there's projects, there's sort of like, there's theorists and, historians who will say that they're both part of the same kind of general project with LA, which was kind of creating like a centralized downtown that was more corporate friendly and less worried about people, right? Like, and Bunker Hill was a neighborhood in downtown that got raised to make way for ops buildings, pretty much, like the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, stuff like that. So I guess this is an LA audience. I don't have to say that. So it was the same forces at play that caused both of those things. I mean, and even if you think about public housing, one of the reasons that Frank Wilkinson and his allies wanted to put public housing in those communities was because of they were going to need to find something to do with the people who lived in Bunker Hill. Like, that was actually part of the conversation. So the kind of questions of housing and corporate development and where, poor people get to live in LA at this time were really up in the air. And whether or not you were a, quote unquote progressive, or you were a, quote unquote conservative, business leader who wanted private development, you were probably talking about displacing people and kind of rebuilding the city physically to your own vision for what it should be. And with Dodger Stadium, that's what happened. And with Bunker Hill, that's what happened. And had it been Elysian Park Heights instead of Dodger Stadium on a certain level, that's still what would have happened.
Tommy Stanton asked, you illustrate the link between transcendentalism and baseball in the book. Does the history of sabermetrics also have philosophical roots? There's a real nerd question for you.
Yeah. I don't know if it has actual philosophical roots. You'd have to ask like Bill James or something like that to see what he was reading when he came up with some of his first sabermetric stuff. I will say though that plenty of ancient mystical groups found meaning in numbers, and in baseball sabermetrics people are kind of doing that in their own way too. Numerology, just in a different way, I guess.
Right. See, about two more questions. Let's see here. Sorry. Amy Warner said, as a Culver City teacher, I am proud you are a graduate of CCHS.
All right.
Which elementary school did you attend? And did you start learning Spanish at El Marino?
Started learning Spanish at El Rincon when the Spanish immersion program in Culver City was there. And then I moved to El Marino when it moved to El Marino. So that answers both questions. Thanks for being here.
That's cool.
All right. That is cool.
Let's see. One last question. This is a pretty hard-hitting one, so it's a good one to end on. After the Dodger dog, what is your favorite all-time concession item at Dodger Stadium?
My favorite. This is going to be really not like a good answer. I have two. One is the chocolate malts. The malts are the best thing at Dodger Stadium when they have them, because they've come in and out of style depending on the ownership. And I'm like a sucker for the Carl's Jr. at Dodger Stadium, which also isn't there anymore. But I used to love going up to the reserve level and getting Carl's Jr. at Dodger games. I don't know why, but like sitting there and eating those Carl's Jr. was great. Also, one year they had King Taco at Dodger Stadium, or 2 years, and that was great too.
That was from Tim Lopez. So, Tim, I hope that answers your question. I think that's about all the time that we have for the Q&A part. Janice, I can turn it back over to you if you have any final thoughts or final questions that you might want to ask it.
Yeah, actually, I do have one last question. When it came to writing this book, I know you talk a lot about Palo Verde. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to, I guess, focus in on one community, but acknowledging that were more than one?
Yeah, so there were three communities that we now collectively call Chavez Ravine, right? Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. I chose Palo Verde because that's where Abrana lived, and she was and her family were the main part of the book. Also, it was the biggest community of the three. It was kind of the most developed. It looked the most like a normal LA neighborhood, probably. But they were all three, unique places and vibrant places. There's a really famous quote-unquote book called Chavez Ravine 1949 by a photographer named Don Normark that came out. And the book's called Chavez Ravine, but the photos are almost all of La Loma. So if you want to get a look at like what La Loma looked like, that would be a way to do it. The cover photo on my book, I think I pointed the right way, was also from La Loma. So, there were three communities. I hope somebody else writes a La Loma book or a Bishop book. Maybe I will. I don't know. But they all deserve to have their stories told.
Have you seen images of Palo Verde?
Yeah. There's photos of it for sure around, and I mean, you can see video of the family getting evicted, unfortunately.
Well, that's fantastic. Janice and Eric, I just want to thank you so very much for doing this and for being a part of our first virtual event. It was fantastic.
Thank you for having us. This has been great.
Thank you, Eric, for telling these stories. I think they're very important. And
thanks, Janice.
As an Angelino also, and Latina, I think these are stories need to be told. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks for reading and for chatting. Thanks to everybody who came to watch too.
Yes, definitely. Yes, thank you for everyone that's attended. We did have Eric, just so you know, there was a couple of votes for a question about you reading excerpts from it, but I thought it was a little late in the game to do that for our event.
Okay,
Next time.
We're ready.
Yeah. So that's a wrap on our presentation for Stealing Home by Eric Nusbaum. Thank you to everybody. We appreciate your support during this time. And just if you are interested in purchasing the book, make sure you can click on that Purchase Stealing Home button right there. That'll take you to our website. We'll be able to purchase it and get it sent over. We're also have a bunch of different ways to order things on our website or accepting donations. You can get gift cards for purchase once our store reopens. So if you'd like regular updates on our events, you can make sure to follow us at Crowdcast here. That way you'll know for all the other future virtual events that will be happening. This will also be available to watch afterward by following us. You can find it there, and if you have any parts that you want to relive. So again, thank you guys so much, and on behalf of Vroman's Bookstore, have a wonderful evening, and we appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.